Andrew Collier was laying on his back with the cat draped across his chest. He was naked. In his mouth were two condoms, and on the cat's tail was a condom, and his penis had been put inside the cat's mouth.
It is one of the most horrific and demanding murder inquiries for years. Your advice to the gay community tonight?
Yes, quite simple. Be careful. Don't pick up a stranger. Don't go out on one-night stands. It's dangerous. You could be next.
Police hunting the killer of 5 homicidal men in London have been appealing for help at a big gay rights demonstration in the capital.
Tens of thousands of homosexuals stream through central London in their annual gesture of pride and identity. But this year it was against a sombre background. Police and stewards handed out thousands of leaflets appealing for information about the serial killer who's murdered 5 times and is terrorizing London's gay community.
Ini bukanlah berita biasa, namun benar-benar kisah nyata. Saat musim panas pada tahun 1993, polisi Metropolitan London, Inggris, sedang memburu seorang pembunuh yang telah menciptakan suasana mencekam pada kaum LGBT, khususnya bagi kaum homo, setelah adanya kasus yang menyebabkan kematian 5 pria gay dengan cara yang aneh dan mengerikan. Bahkan aktor tampan Tom Cruise sempat menjadi sasaran si pelaku. Masa yang mencekam itu telah menyulut aksi unjuk rasa besar-besaran kaum LGBT karena si pelaku belum juga tertangkap. Kasus ini membuat polisi London frustasi sekaligus diejek dengan cara si pelaku mempermainkan para detektif yang sedang bekerja melakukan penyelidikan, yang akan kita kupas lebih dalam lagi dalam tayangan dokumenter khas Gay Channel. Selengkapnya sesaat lagi hanya di YouTube Gay Channel, membuka jendela dunia.
I'm Courtney from Australia and you're watching Gay Channel.
Pada awal 1990-an, Soho, sebuah kawasan di distrik West End, London, Inggris, telah dikenal menjadi pusat kancah para pria gay London, di mana di kawasan ini terdapat banyak tempat-tempat hiburan para pria gay secara terang-terangan, seperti klub-klub malam, bar, dan tempat-tempat sauna untuk pria gay. Dan yang lebih memprihatinkan, salah satu tempat hiburan itu memiliki reputasi yang sangat buruk, karena di tempat ini adalah tempat di mana pria-pria gay yang menyukai SM berdatangan untuk bertemu dan berkencan dengan pria-pria gay lainnya yang ingin meluapkan hasratnya yang menyimpang dan mengerikan, berhubungan secara SM. Dan sebuah pub bernama Coleherne inilah menjadi tempat berkumpul mereka, dan sekaligus menjadi sasaran empuk bagi orang yang berniat jahat dalam mencari korbannya.
The Coleherne back then was the destination venue for gay leathermen in London. The windows were blacked out, so you couldn't see inside. It was quite industrial, the decor inside.
The method of meeting people in the Coleherne pub was quite straightforward. People were there with similar interests, so walking up to strangers and engaging in conversation was not unusual at all. Taking that person home, a person you've only met for a few minutes, happens as well.
In the pursuit of sex. But there is a sizable minority of gay men who will go out and they will go home with somebody knowing nothing about them.
Peter Walker, pria gay berusia 45 tahun, seorang asisten sutradara teater terkenal yang bekerja di West End. Malam itu, ia kembali mengunjungi pub Coleherne. Tetapi malam itu adalah malam terakhir hidupnya setelah ia pergi berkencan dengan pria gay yang baru dikenalnya di pub Coleherne. Karena beberapa hari kemudian, seorang pria misterius menelpon jurnalis surat kabar The Sun yang memberitahu bahwa Peter Walker telah tewas di apartemennya di Battersea dan ia yang telah melakukannya.
I've personally taken thousands upon thousands of phone calls and I've never taken a phone call like that. The guy sounded very normal, very ordinary and was just started talking about two dogs locked in a flat. And I kept politely saying, I'm really sorry, but it's not a story for the Sun.
Rupanya yang mendorong si penelpon misterius itu untuk menelpon karena ia khawatir ada anjing-anjing yang terkurung selama beberapa hari di apartemen Peter. Dan anjing itu perlu dilepaskan dan diberi makan.
And then he just suddenly dropped this bombshell that the reason he was actually phoning us was that he wanted the dogs to be freed because he'd killed their owner. He said the man he was gay and that he was interested in sex was the way he put it. I tried to keep him talking to get as much information as I could.
Lantas polisi disiagakan dan detektif Martin Finnegan adalah orang pertama yang datang ke TKP.
The door had been opened by the caretaker, so we got in without having to break any doors down. The dogs are in the lounge and the bedroom was in disarray, as if it had been ransacked, the sort of thing you'd expect from a burglary.
Ternyata jelas bahwa panggilan telepon itu bukanlah tipuan setelah menemukan jasad Peter Walker.
The body was discovered in the bed, and we knew that he had died at another person's hand.
He had a condom in his nose, condom in his mouth. He had two teddy bears placed on his chest in what was sort of 69 position.
From the post-mortem, we found out he died of asphyxia, inhaling his own vomit, so he'd been suffocated. So we have a situation where Peter Walker has admitted a complete stranger into his flat with his keys, so there's no forced entry.
Penelpon misterius itu tampaknya ingin memberitahu polisi tentang kejahatannya, tetapi bukan berarti dia ingin ditangkap karena dia tidak meninggalkan bukti petunjuk apapun, seolah ia telah melakukan pembunuhan yang sempurna, karena ia rupanya telah membersihkan apartemen itu dengan cermat, sehingga polisi tidak dapat memperoleh apapun. Hingga beberapa minggu kemudian, penyelidikan pun terhenti. Tetapi polisi telah bekerja sama dengan komunitas gay untuk mencari informasi tentang Peter Walker. Setelah polisi mengetahui bahwa Peter adalah seorang gay dan sangat aktif di komunitas gay London.
He wiped any surface that he had touched clean of his fingerprints. Moreover, he bagged up his clothing after he'd committed the crime and destroyed it.
And at 7 o'clock, he then left and just mingled out with the crowd. Amongst the gay community, we built up a deep understanding of how Peter lived his life and his social activities, his activities. So we knew an awful lot about Peter, and that gave us the strongest indication of probably how he met his death, but we didn't have that final link. So that was frustrating. There was really nowhere else for us to go. So these inquiries cannot go on forever.
Dan pada saat ini, si pelaku merasa puas bahwa ia telah berhasil lolos, hingga ia melanjutkan kembali mencari korban berikutnya, dengan targetnya adalah para pria gay di London. Setelah pria misterius itu berhasil lolos dari pembunuhan pertamanya, ia sekarang siap untuk melakukannya lagi. Dan kali ini, korbannya adalah pria gay berusia 37 tahun, seorang pustakawan bernama Christopher Dunn.
On the 28th of May, the body of Christopher Dunn was found in his home at Whetstone. And again, the scene was very staged. He was lying, suffered ligature mutilation.
Sama seperti korban pertamanya, pria misterius itu mencari seorang pria gay yang menyukai hubungan SM, yang mencoba mendekatinya di bar Coleherne. Dan malang menimpa Christopher. Pada malam itu, ia mendekati pria misterius itu dan mengajaknya berkencan di apartemennya di Millstone.
Christopher Dunn lived in Willesden, a single man living alone, and he was found face down on his bed. The pathologist who examined the body said that he wasn't quite sure about the cause of death. It could have been manual strangulation through a homosexual sex act that gone wrong.
Pada saat ini, polisi tidak mengkaitkan kasus ini dengan kasus sebelumnya, sehingga kepolisian membentuk 2 tim detektif yang terpisah untuk menyelidiki kasus Peter Walker dan Christopher Dunn.
And I understand that inquiry led the police to believe that was a scheme that had gone tragically wrong, and there was no suggestion to believe it was anything other than a pure accident, and it was treated as such. It was not treated as a murder.
Enam hari kemudian setelah pria misterius itu lolos dari 2 kali pembunuhan, pada 4 Juni 1993, detektif menerima laporan kasus yang sama yang menimpa pria gay. Kali ini korbannya adalah seorang pengusaha asal Amerika yang bekerja di London, Perry Bradley, berusia 35 tahun. Ia adalah anak dari anggota Kongres Amerika dan penggalang dana Partai Demokrat Texas.
And we went out to the scene, and that was Perry Bradley. The body was laid out on the bed, it was bound, the noose was around his neck. There was no obvious sign of any struggle or fight. The crime scene indicated that there were sexual motivations. The way the body was arranged and laid out, it was clearly a little bit unusual. And we were a little bit surprised when we contacted the family and found that there was no apparent history of homosexuality or anything in his background whatsoever.
Dan pada saat ini, kepolisian membentuk 3 tim secara terpisah dalam penyelidikan 3 kasus kematian pria-pria gay. Informasi yang didapatkan detektif bahwa sebelum kematian Perry Bradley di apartemennya di Kensington, ia juga telah mengunjungi bar Coleherne. Dan lagi-lagi, si pelaku benar-benar membersihkan TKP dengan sangat hati-hati hingga tidak meninggalkan jejak apapun yang dapat menjadi bukti. Hanya berjarak 3 hari setelah pembunuhan Perry Bradley, pria misterius itu kembali melanjutkan aksinya yang menjadi pembunuhan keempatnya. Dan keempatnya adalah pria gay berusia 33 tahun, Andrew Collier. Ia adalah penjaga keamanan sebuah komplek perumahan di West East London dan merupakan pengunjung tetap bar Coleherne. Pada malam Andrew bertemu pria misterius itu di bar Coleherne dan mengajaknya berkencan di rumahnya di Dalston. 2 hari kemudian, polisi menemukan jasadnya terbaring di tempat tidurnya dalam keadaan yang membuat para polisi terkejut karena si pelaku meninggalkan korbannya dengan cara yang benar-benar aneh dan mengerikan.
We eventually got into the flat at Andrew Collier's place. The scene that met us there was just one of horror. Never seen anything like it before. Andrew Collier was laying on his back with the cat draped across his chest. He was naked. In his mouth were 2 condoms, and on the cat's tail was a condom, and his penis had been put inside the cat's mouth. And if you can try and picture that, it's just so strange.
Polisi kemudian melihat ada kesamaan antara kasus ini dengan kasus kematian Peter Walker 3 bulan sebelumnya. Dan pada saat ini, para detektif menemukan terobosan penting saat si pelaku mulai ceroboh dengan meninggalkan sidik jari di jendela rumah Andrew. Walaupun sidik jari ini merupakan petunjuk kuat pertama yang ditemukan polisi untuk dapat mengungkapkan identitas si pelaku, namun pada tahun 1993, belum ada database terkomputerisasi untuk dapat melakukan pencarian secara mudah. Pada saat ini, polisi hanya dapat mencocokkan hasil sidik jari tersebut dengan tersangka, di mana pada saat ini polisi belum dapat mengidentifikasi siapa orang yang menjadi tersangkanya. Tetapi bagaimanapun, kini para detektif telah melihat keterkaitan antara kasus pembunuhan Peter Walker, Perry Bradley, Christopher Dunn, serta Andrew Collier yang semuanya adalah pria-pria gay.
It is one of the most horrific and demanding murder inquiries for years.
There are links with all 4 murders, and that was pathologically established this afternoon.
Pada hari ini, Kepolisian Metropolitan London menerima panggilan telepon mengejutkan, sekaligus dianggap sebagai sebuah ejekan yang mempermainkan polisi, ketika ditelepon lagi oleh si pelaku yang menanyakan mengapa kasus Peter Walker dihentikan. Dan ketika polisi bertanya mengapa ia melakukannya, si penelpon misterius itu mengatakan bahwa itu adalah resolusinya di tahun baru, yang terobsesi ingin menjadi pembunuh berantai terkenal.
Why are you doing this? But why in particular homosexuals?
The CID officer at Battersea received a phone call from a man inquiring as to why the Peter Walker inquiry had been wound down, asking were we not interested in the death of the man. And he went on to say that he told us that he'd already killed Mr. Bradley in Kensington, Christopher Dunn in Wheelstone, and Andrew Collier in Hackney, and said that he was going to carry on, that he wanted to be a serial killer, and that was his New Year resolution.
I think with most serial killers there's this element of play and taunting the police, so certainly he was playing games and he wanted the notoriety. What really frustrated him was the fact that we hadn't made any connections with the first killing, and even the second killing had gone unnoticed, when what he wanted was to be a serial killer. And so this is why he was trying to court the publicity, trying to get us to declare it to be a linked series in order that he could thrive in the publicity.
Dan pada malam tanggal 12 Juni 1993, seorang pengunjung bar Coleherne, pria berusia 41 tahun yang bekerja sebagai koki bernama Emmanuel Spiteri, secara tidak sengaja bertemu dan berbicara dengan seorang pria misterius di stasiun kereta bawah tanah yang akan menjadi mimpi buruk bagi Emmanuel Spiteri dan sekaligus akan menjadi kunci untuk menuntut polisi dalam mengungkap identitas si pelaku. Kepolisian Metropolitan London saat ini sampai pada kesimpulan bahwa 4 kasus pembunuhan pria-pria gay ini dilakukan oleh satu orang.
We fairly quickly, I think, identified that Walker, Bradley, Collier and Dunn was a linked series. And we called a meeting of the respective investigating officers. And I remember it very well because we were talking about going over the forensics once again, the bodies, to see if we could find any common factors there, now that we knew it was probably a linked series.
Tetapi pada saat ini, polisi kembali terkejut karena ternyata kasusnya kini bertambah lagi ketika polisi dihubungi kembali oleh penelpon misterius yang menyarankan polisi untuk mencari mayat di unit apartemen yang terbakar.
Eventually, a phone call came in from the police down in Lewisham saying that there's a flat with blackened windows and smoke billowing out, and inside was the body of a man who turned out to be Emmanuel Spiteri. Again, all the same methodology was used, the ligatures, the handcuffs, they were all removed after but this time, before he left, he stacked all the bedding and clothing in the centre of them and set fire to it.
Si pelaku kini semakin tak terkendali. Ia menjadi kecanduan, mengatakan pada polisi bahwa ia akan terus melakukannya lagi. Setelah polisi menemukan jasad Emmanuel Spiteri sebagai korban pria gay kelima, akhirnya mereka mengadakan siaran pers di TV nasional yang memberitahukan bahwa seorang pembunuh berantai sedang berkeliaran di London.
Your advice to the gay community tonight?
Yes, quite simple. Be careful. Don't pick up a stranger. Don't go out on one-night stands. It's dangerous. You could be next.
Polisi juga memperingatkan komunitas gay London untuk lebih waspada karena pria-pria gay yang dijadikan sasarannya. Sekaligus meminta informasi apapun yang mungkin dapat mengarah pada penangkapan si pelaku. Berita itu pun telah menimbulkan kecemasan dan suasana mencekam bagi kaum gay London.
There really was a palpable sense of fear. The press, of course, were making it much worse. I don't remember which paper it was, but one of them had a headline which was "Fairy Liquidator." A lot of them latched onto the phrase "gay slut."
Got a serial killer on our hands. That's the bottom line. Is that we need help to catch him.
Ribuan orang dalam komunitas LGBT London mulai berjalan beriringan. Mereka turun ke jalan menyuarakan dan mengecam tindakan apapun yang mengarah pada kebencian terhadap kaum LGBT.
Police hunting the of 5 homosexual men in London have been appealing for help at a big gay rights demonstration in the capital.
Tens of thousands of homosexuals streamed through central London in their annual gesture of pride and identity. But this year it was against a sombre background. Police and stewards handed out thousands of leaflets appealing for information about the serial killer who's murdered 5 times and is terrorizing London's gay community.
I vividly recall the Pride festival that year.
Pada saat ini, komunitas LGBT London dalam siaga tinggi. Karena walaupun polisi tengah berburu secara besar-besaran, tetapi si pelaku masih belum juga tertangkap. Dengan kewaspadaan tinggi komunitas gay, akhirnya polisi mendapatkan apa yang mereka butuhkan dari saksi-saksi melalui kelompok kepolisian gay London atau GayLob yang selama ini bekerja untuk membantu korban-korban LGBT dari kasus kekerasan. Melalui informasi inilah, polisi kemudian mengetahui rute perjalanan antara apartemen dan pub Coleherne serta memperhatikan bahwa kemungkinan besar jalan pulang melewati stasiun Charing Cross, sebuah stasiun yang baru saja dilengkapi dengan kamera CCTV pertama di London. Dan tidak lama kemudian, polisi mendapatkan gambar rekaman CCTV yang memperlihatkan pria bertubuh tinggi besar sedang berbicara dengan korban kelima.
We felt that the image was sufficiently good, would be able to identify him, and so that triggered us into releasing the information.
Lalu beberapa hari kemudian polisi segera mempublikasikan gambar CCTV tersebut. Dua hari setelah gambar yang diduga si pelaku tersebar ke publik, seorang pengacara di Southend menghubungi polisi. Pengacara tersebut memberikan surat pernyataan yang dibuat oleh kliennya, yang mempertanyakan mengapa kliennya yang terlihat dengan Emmanuel Spiteri pada gambar CCTV dipublikasikan. Klien tersebut mengaku bahwa itu memang dirinya, tetapi ia bukanlah si pelaku yang selama ini dicari polisi. Karena pada malam itu, mereka telah berpisah setelah Emmanuel Spiteri bersama pria gay lainnya yang tidak dikenali ada di apartemen Emmanuel.
He went to a solicitor after seeing his image on television, saying, "I am the man in the video, but I'm not the killer." Yes, I did go to Coleherne. I met Emmanuel Spiteri there. He invited me back to his flat in South London. We travelled on the train to Charing Cross. When I got to the front door, there was another man there. I didn't want to have a threesome, so I left immediately and slept in the local churchyard.
Tetapi polisi tak lantas mempercayainya. Mereka kemudian memeriksa rekaman panggilan telepon dari si penelpon misterius beberapa waktu sebelumnya yang mengaku sebagai pelaku. Polisi mengetahui suara-suara di belakang panggilan telepon tersebut berasal dari stasiun kereta di Venture Street, jalur yang melayani Southend. Polisi juga lantas mencocokkan hasil bukti sidik jari yang telah mereka temukan sebelumnya di jendela apartemen korban keempat, Andrew Collier.
We went to his lawyer's office to speak to him. We obviously arrested him and interviewed him. The crucial thing was that at that point we were able to get his fingerprints, having arrested him, that we had a fingerprint of him inside Collier's flat.
Saat detektif membandingkan hasil sidik jari yang telah ditemukan di apartemen Andrew Collier dengan sidik jari klien tersebut, mereka menemukan bahwa ternyata hasilnya sangat cocok. Akhirnya polisi yakin bahwa mereka telah menemukan si pelaku yang selama ini dicarinya. Mereka lantas segera menahannya, dan dia adalah Cullen Ireland. Untuk sobat semua, sebelum lanjut ada baiknya untuk mengklik terlebih dahulu tombol like, share, dan subscribe, serta tombol notifikasinya, agar tak ketinggalan update kisah nyata tak biasa dari K-Channel selanjutnya. Cullen Ireland lahir pada 16 Maret 1954 di Dartford, Kent, Inggris. Sejak hari pertama ia dilahirkan, hidupnya penuh dengan kekecewaan dan kegagalan. Ayahnya tidak menginginkan Cullen menjadi bagian hidupnya, sehingga sang ayah meninggalkan Cullen dan ibunya yang masih berusia 17 tahun, tak lama sebelum Cullen dilahirkan. Ibunya sangat miskin. Ia hidup tanpa memiliki uang, hingga tak ada pilihan lain lagi selain pindah kembali bersama orang tuanya di Dartford. Dan sepanjang hidupnya ini, Cullen dan keluarganya menjalani hidup dengan kesulitan yang sangat ekstrim. Mereka bahkan sering tinggal berpindah-pindah karena terkait dengan kesulitan sewa rumah.
Ireland never knew his biological father, and I think that's quite an important thing to note, because we have to remember what England was like in the early 1950s, where that kind of birth out of wedlock would be regarded very badly by the local community.
His mother was a very poor person.
She appeared to be very much into wanting to give him something that was good, wanting to make things good for him, but it didn't work out.
I think he was probably really hurt by it. I'm sure any child would be, coming home from school and finding that their home is no longer their home and their mother has moved off somewhere.
So we've got a young man whose pattern of early life is characterized by movement, disruption, and an anxiety that somehow he doesn't quite fit in and that there are people talking about him.
Pada tahun 1970, saat usianya 16 tahun, Cullen pergi ke London. Ia mulai berkeliaran di tempat-tempat hiburan yang tanpa diduganya, tempat-tempat hiburan itu memiliki reputasi buruk karena merupakan tempat yang banyak dikunjungi kelompok motor, dan Cullen hampir menjadi korban kelompok tersebut.
We now know this is a particularly disreputable amusement arcade because it's targeted and frequented by pedophiles who will particularly target young boys. What I think we begin to see is Ireland's association with sexual subcultures.
Pada tahun 1970-an hingga 1980-an, kehidupan Cullen dijalani dengan banyak catatan kriminal ringan.
A list of about 50 or 30 court appearances, all relatively minor offences to begin with. TDA, burglary, deception. He wasn't your rapist, he wasn't your armed robber.
Di masa ini, Cullen terus berjuang untuk memiliki hidup yang layak. Ia mencoba bekerja tetapi tidak ada yang bertahan. Lalu pada tahun 1981, Cullen Ireland bertemu dengan seorang wanita bernama Virginia Zemet yang akhirnya ia nikahi setahun kemudian pada tahun 1982. Setelah ia bekerja sebagai penjaga keamanan sebuah komplek perumahan.
He was the biggest guy in that. He seemed pretty quiet. Then once we got to know each other, then he started chatting and everything. And that was when I started going to his flat in Holloway. Colin's wife was in a wheelchair, Victoria. When I went there, it was a pleasant home life, you know what I mean?
I think it's quite interesting that his first wife is disabled
and he instead can dominate her because he's providing a caring service as he would see it.
Tampaknya Cullen berhasil membenahi hidupnya dengan benar. Bahkan ia juga secara sukarela menjadi petugas patroli informal di lingkungan rumahnya. Ia berpatroli dan melaporkan hal-hal yang dianggap mencurigakan pada polisi. Kehidupan pernikahan Cullen dan istrinya terbangun dengan begitu harmonis. Bahkan istrinya menggambarkan Cullen adalah suami yang perhatian, hingga dijuluki raksasa yang lembut. Tetapi setelah 5 tahun pernikahan, Cullen dan Virginia akhirnya bercerai karena Cullen diketahui telah berselingkuh dengan wanita lain. Tahun 1989, Cullen yang memiliki masa kanak-kanak yang tidak stabil dan pernikahan yang gagal, pergi berakhir pekan di Devon. Lalu ia bertemu dengan seorang wanita bernama Janet Young. Ia adalah pemilik bar Globe Inn.
I first met Colin Ireland when I owned the Globe Inn pub where I live, and he came in as a customer. He stood in the doorway, dressed in camouflage, very impressive figure. The conversation just stopped dead in the pub as he came in the door. My barmaid at the time, she didn't like him at all. She warned me off. She said, no, there's something not right. But I didn't feel that. I felt he was ideal for me in my situation. So he gradually moved in.
Janet dengan cepat jatuh cinta pada Cullen. Dan setelah 3 bulan mereka berhubungan, akhirnya Cullen menikahi Janet dalam resepsi pernikahan yang sangat sederhana pada tahun 1990. Dan sejak menikah, mereka berdua yang menjalankan usaha bar Globe Inn bersama.
He hated being behind the bar. He wasn't really a very good mixer, although he was friendly. I think people in the pub found him a little bit scary because he was a very tall, big man. He was with me for about 3 months before he asked me to marry him. I wasn't sure that I wanted to get married, but he said, if we don't trust one another, then what's the point of being together? We had a small reception and a really fun day. We got married in January of 1990. He'd fitted in really well. My children were prepared to accept him being there. He liked being with them. I think it made him feel accepted and normal.
Saat pernikahan mereka menginjak 4 bulan, Janet dan anak-anaknya pergi ke rumah ibunya untuk berakhir pekan. Ia meninggalkan suaminya sendiri, dan rupanya hari itu adalah hari di mana mereka tidak akan lagi saling bertemu.
He was due to come and pick me up on the Sunday, and he didn't come. And we assumed that there'd been an accident or something had happened, or a car had broken down. So we phoned the hospitals, we phoned the police, nobody had seen anything of him.
Ireland will go back to the pub and take money from the pub, enough to set himself up again.
I was just shocked. I didn't know what had happened to him. I thought he'd been killed, run over, in hospital, arrested. And then he put my card in the machine and took out every penny that I had. I reported him missing, but the police said, well, he's just gone. I went bust. My children and I went into a homeless hostel. It was a nightmare. I realised he was probably just a man all along, and I fell for it, and he was just looking for his opportunity to get what he could and go.
Walaupun pernikahan Cullen dan Janet sering terjadi perselisihan, tetapi tidak pernah ada KDRT yang terjadi. Menurut Cullen, alasan ia pergi meninggalkan Janet dan menghilang dari Devon karena setelah beberapa bulan menikah, ia merasa bosan dengan kehidupan pernikahannya.
Ireland conforms to a classic psychopath, always taking from somebody what he needs to have so as to continue in the lifestyle that he wants.
Cullen lalu pindah ke South End, sekitar lebih dari 200 miles jauhnya dari Devon. Di sini ia dengan cepat mendapatkan pekerjaan di tempat penampungan tunawisma dan menunjukkan kemampuannya untuk berbaur dengan masyarakat dan menjalani kehidupan yang normal.
I was the manager of an emergency night shelter for homeless people in Southend, and Colin was one of a team of volunteers. First impressions of Colin were he's a very big man. He made it quite clear that he'd been to prison. He had apparently been involved in at a local cinema and had tied up someone, a manager or someone at the theatre, and gone to prison for it. He did have some rather narrow opinions of certain sections of society. He made it quite clear that he didn't agree with homosexuality. He didn't like the gay community at all. The moment Colin arrived at the night shelter as a volunteer, I do remember because he's a very, very large man, and he stood in the doorway and just advised me that he'd been sent by another agency. He was very passionate about the work that he did, probably more passionate than any of the other volunteers that we had.
Selama hampir 6 bulan hidup di tempat penampungan, ia merasakan bahwa semua yang ia butuhkan dalam menjalani kehidupannya telah terpenuhi. Ia benar-benar merasa nyaman. Tetapi sebagian sukarelawan di tempat penampungan ini mulai tidak suka pada Colin, yang disebut berperilaku aneh dan sombong, hingga suatu ketika mereka berselisih.
Other volunteers don't like his manner, find him quite overbearing, find him frightening.
The assistant manager came to me and felt that Colin's behaviour on occasions wasn't appropriate, and she was rather concerned about this. That matter was taken to the committee, and they decided then that it probably would be a good idea to let Colin go.
Dan 1 tahun setelah ia bekerja di tempat penampungan, akhirnya ia diberhentikan. Pada saat ini, Colin merasa bahwa sekali lagi ia telah ditolak oleh masyarakat, dan itu adalah pukulan baginya.
He felt that his dismissal was unfair and unjustified. He also felt that he had given back something to society, and basically that hadn't been recognised. I believe that getting dismissed from the night shelter was crucial to his future. It was an absolutely crucial part of what happened to him and why he went on to do what he did.
Kini Colin berpikir untuk mencoba menjadi orang yang berbeda. Tetapi saat ini, ia banyak menghabiskan waktunya membaca buku-buku para pembunuh berantai, yang akhirnya pada awal tahun baru 1993, ia memutuskan untuk menjadi pembunuh berantai sebagai resolusi tahun baru dan akan menjadi terkenal.
He had read a book written by Robert Ressler called Whoever Fights Monsters, and therefore Ireland says he's going to become famous. He's going to become a somebody in the community. At that point, he makes a New Year's resolution to himself that he's going to become a serial killer.
Lalu, ia mulai mempelajari profil mereka satu persatu dengan cermat. Juga mempelajari geografis dalam prosesnya. Karena alasan inilah, Colin memutuskan akan melakukannya di daerah yang jauh dari tempat tinggalnya. Dan ia juga membaca bahwa seseorang harus memiliki jumlah tubuh korban untuk memenuhi syarat sebagai pembunuh berantai. Lalu Colin memutuskan pria-pria gay akan menjadi sasarannya. Dan karena reputasinya di komunitas gay sebagai tempat mencari pasangan semalam dengan mudah, yang banyak dikunjungi pria-pria gay dengan kecenderungan S&M, yang menjadikan ia memilih pub Coleherne untuk mencari calon-calon korbannya.
I think the Colin Islands picked up his victims at places like the Coleherne was not accidental. Those spaces invited people who were maybe loners, maybe felt cut off from their surroundings, from their neighbours, from their families, so it was harder for the police to trace them.
Di pub ini, para pria gay memakai sapu tangan berkode warna untuk menunjukkan kecenderungan SM mereka, dan ini memudahkan Colin untuk mencapai labelnya sebagai pembunuh berantai yang terkenal.
broadcasting your sexual choices by the way you dress, by the code of the way that you look, which kind of proclaims not just that you're gay, but also that you're possibly into S and bondage, etc., etc. That kind of provides a very, very fertile hunting ground for somebody who would like to come and do you harm.
And you'd have people in here, clientele, who would identify whichever proclivity was to their taste, which made targeting by Colin Ireland extremely easy.
There were a whole series of signals. If you were into this, you'd wear this color handkerchief. If you were into that, you'd wear another one.
Most heterosexual men would feel uncomfortable going into a gay bar and speaking to someone who is gay and getting them to come with you. You would have to have some degree of comfort or experience in doing that.
And so it's his understanding of that subculture which gives him the passport to enter areas in London which were quite secret. And it's his understanding of that, having that passport, which allows him to kill repeatedly, time after time.
Tetapi setelah penahanannya, Cullen Ireland hanya didakwa dengan 2 kasus pembunuhan pada kasus Andrew Collier dan Emmanuel Spiteri. Karena polisi tidak memiliki cukup bukti untuk menuntut Cullen pada 3 korban lainnya. Dan hal itu telah membuat Cullen frustasi karena ia tidak akan mendapatkan label yang diinginkannya sebagai pembunuh berantai. Dan demi untuk mendapatkan pengakuan dan label tersebut yang merupakan obsesinya untuk mewujudkan resolusi tahun baru 1993, akhirnya 3 minggu kemudian, ia mengakui bahwa ia juga adalah pelaku dari 3 korban lainnya. Selama pengakuannya pada polisi, Cullen menjelaskan secara jujur. Ia dengan senang hati tanpa ada rasa penyesalan sedikit pun. Ia menceritakan secara rinci bagaimana ia menjerat korbannya sebelum mengakhiri hidupnya.
He decided to tell all, and he admitted to us the full extent of his involvement.
I found him willing to talk. I found him articulate and quite happy to provide details.
He was calm, relaxed, he didn't raise his voice.
Cullen menyamar sebagai pria gay dengan masuk ke pub gay Coleherne yang terkenal. Cullen mengatakan bahwa ia akan menunggu pria-pria gay yang mendekatinya dan mengajaknya berkencan semalam ke tempat tinggal mereka. Dan 5 korban pria gay itu semuanya adalah para pengunjung bar Coleherne.
I feel that certain sides of my character, not all of me, by any means, I'm probably 60-70% quite a reasonable human being most of the time. But there is that side of my character that is negative, it's quite cold and calculating.
He definitely was a man who needed to be locked away. And he said he was 60% okay, decent guy, and 40% a nudge and a gay man. And I think that's absolutely right.
I felt if I was approached by one of that group type that tended to trigger these things in me, I felt that time, I felt there was a likelihood that I would kill. I went and got a plastic bag from the kitchen over his head, and I bound him tied him to the bed.
Ireland was looking forward, I imagine, to reading about the death of Peter Walker in the papers, for it to be on the news, whether it was the local news or the national news. And when Peter's murder doesn't make front page news, and he founds the Sun newspaper. Christopher Dunn is also somebody who is gay, interested in sadomasochism, is also somebody who frequents the Coleherne pub, the pub where Ireland is going to have a passport to because he understands the codes, the subculture.
Setiap Cullen selesai melakukan aksi kejamnya dan meninggalkan korban dengan cara yang aneh dan mengerikan, ia menghabiskan waktu berjam-jam hingga pagi hari untuk membersihkan dulu semua bukti-bukti kehadirannya di apartemen si korban dengan sangat hati-hati. Dan sebelum ia mengakhiri hidup mereka, ia memaksa meminta nomor PIN kartu ATM mereka. Dan Cullen mengambil uang mereka yang ada di dompetnya. Lalu saat pagi hari, ia pergi meninggalkan TKP. Ia segera menarik uang milik korban di mesin ATM dan kembali ke kehidupannya di Southend, sambil membuang barang-barang bukti yang memberatkannya dengan membuangnya dari kereta api yang sedang melaju kencang saat perjalanan pulang kembali ke Southend.
I was carrying a small torch, a magnite in a pouch, and a couple of other things, a lock knife, and I'd got a book and a pen, and I was going to have him repeat his PIN number, I strangled him.
Ireland had to persuade Bradley that he should allow Ireland to him up.
We went back to the flat, and I don't think he was so much into the S&M, but I said I had to. So it's going to be a long night. I said I suggest you get some sleep if you can. And I just sat and listened to the radio, and he actually went to sleep. And while he was asleep, I throttled him with the noose.
Perry Bradley was not into sadomasochism or bondage, and Ireland convinced him that this was the only way he could get any gratification, that he, Ireland, could get that. And so Perry Bradley agreed to go along with that. So he was quite chillingly ruthless in the way that he went about his task. And after he killed Perry Bradley, he made himself a sandwich and stayed there until the morning when there were more people on the street, and he felt he could more effectively make good his escape. Very chilling character.
He actually stayed with them for several hours, and that indicates to me somebody who's got an incredible amount of control, very well organised killer.
I wouldn't have been affected mentally so much, but sitting in with these bodies for sort of like 5 or 6 hours or something.
When Colin Ireland left the crime scene, he took with him every single thing that he touched.
So he doesn't want to leave blood, semen, hair, fibres, fingerprints.
He got into the habit in his early crimes of reimbursing himself for the expense of committing them. And having murdered them, he would go off to a cash point and using their PIN number and their credit card, he then took out, I think in certainly 3 cases, at least £200, I think.
Pada kasus korbannya yang keempat, Andrew Collier, alasan Cullen meninggalkan TKP dan korbannya dengan cara yang sangat aneh, karena Cullen menemukan catatan medis milik Andrew yang mengungkapkan bahwa Andrew mengidap positif HIV, dan hal itulah yang membuatnya sangat marah.
I felt real anger towards him because he thought there was going to be a sexual encounter. At no time did he warn me. I was on a sort of almost like a roller coaster thing, and I felt, you know, there was more I was doing, you know.
Steals Andrew Collier's cat, and he's going to engage in post-death behaviours in ways which are frankly quite disgusting. Ireland is trying to buy the public's sympathy by saying this man was not only gay and interested in sadomasochism, he was also HIV positive.
Cullen memang sangat berhati-hati untuk tidak meninggalkan bukti forensik apapun. Tetapi di apartemen Andrew inilah, ia telah melakukan kecerobohannya dengan meninggalkan sidik jari di jendela. Ketika saat itu, ada gangguan di luar apartemen. Ia mendengar kebisingan, lalu melihat keluar jendela untuk melihat apa yang sedang terjadi. Dan pada saat inilah, tanpa disadari, ia telah meninggalkan sidik jari.
Where the disturbance took place, which drew Andrew Collier and Colin Ireland to the window, and where Colin Ireland left that fingerprint for police to find.
He stared unblinking at me the whole time. It was very, very unnerving. The only reaction I got was when I told him we had a fingerprint of his at Andrew Collier's.
When Colin spoke to my colleague and CID officer in Battersea, he wanted to know why we'd stopped the investigation into Peter Walker.
He was losing out on fame and notoriety, so he named all of the victims and was quite adamant about the fact that he had killed all four.
Colin said, I'm going to keep going till I'm caught. I'll do another one. I've always dreamed of doing the perfect murder.
The impact upon police was absolutely immense. This was a huge inquiry now.
If you look at the crime scenes from number 1 to number 5, when he set fire to the house, to Spiteri's house, this was building up. So he said he was on a roller coaster, and I'm sure he was on a roller coaster.
It was a destructive element to me. I'm very cold, and I think in some moods I'm quite happy to burn the world down.
He had a prepared statement where it said, yes, I was the man with Spiteri. I did go to his home in Heather Green, but there was another man indoors. I didn't want to him, so I slept in the local churchyard and then came back to Southend.
I believe it was around about June that year. Colin came in, he sat down, we were watching TV. The news was on, and there was a report about the killings in London. And Colin turned to me and said, you know, what do you think of this thing? And my reply was, oh, there's another nutter on the loose. I had no idea that it was him.
He gave us vital information around what he saw on the night in question that Spiteri was killed. That he saw them both together, that they sat on the train, there was 2 girls on the train as well, and gave us a good description of Spiteri and Alan.
He came into the house. It was an evening, I believe it was a Sunday evening. He was very anxious. He behaved very strangely, and we were really quite disconcerted by it. And we really just wanted him to leave. Gave him a lift back to where he was living at the time, and he was talking in the third tense, talking very strangely. He was muttering and mumbling, and very uncomfortable to be around, and we just wanted to get away from him, basically. I was cooking in the kitchen and noticed an identikit picture in a local newspaper. And I thought to myself, you know, oh, it looks like Colin. I didn't pay much attention to it, and of course, when the press turned up, that was one of the things that came to mind. I realised that, yeah, it was definitely Colin.
Colin Iden mengakui 5 dakwaan terhadapnya. Ia dijatuhi 5 hukuman penjara seumur hidup tanpa adanya kemungkinan pembebasan bersyarat. Dengan kata lain, ia tidak akan pernah dibebaskan.
When he was confronted with the fingerprint evidence at the Andrew Collier scene, that picture would have told a story of guilt to the jury. He just couldn't believe that he had made a mistake.
When this comes to trial, any judge worth his salt is going to find me guilty, and he will imprison me.
I don't think anybody in court will ever forget what the judge said about the horror of the multiple nature of these murders. He said, to take 1 life is an outrage. To take 5 lives is carnage.
A serial killer who preyed on her rituals has been jailed for life for murdering 5 men in London earlier this year. The judge recommended that he never be released, saying to take 1 human life is an outrage, to take 5 is carnage.
And he hasn't got the label that he wanted as a serial killer because he's only been charged with 2 murders. This just wasn't good enough for him. So he informed the prison officers that he wanted to talk to police, he wanted to admit all 5, and that's exactly what he did. And there he got his label as a serial
Ireland wasn't remorseful. Ireland positively boasted and gloated over the fact that he was a serial killer.
Ultimate confession is simply because he wanted to achieve the goal that he set out to achieve through his December 1992 New Year's resolution. He wanted to become famous.
Dan di pengadilan, Cullen Ireland dinyatakan sebagai orang yang menakutkan dan berbahaya bagi dunia.
There's a clear narcissistic quality to Ireland. He wanted to take credit for this, and he was very proud of what he did, as are many of these serial killers. They're very pleased with themselves.
What we do know is a lot of serial killers have dysfunctional backgrounds, but it's not to say everybody has a dysfunctional background is going to be a killer, because they're not.
Most serial killers, men who kill men, are themselves gay. Most heterosexual serial killers kill women. What often happens in a case like this is that Ireland himself may be homosexual or may have a strong aspect of homosexuality to his personality, but can't accept it. He doesn't want to accept that. And so there's a part of him that he hates. And by killing others, he's sort of reassuring himself that he's not gay, that's not part of his personality.
We questioned Colin Ireland very closely about his orientation, because having moved in gay circles and going home with gay men and gay men after what could have been activity, it would have made sense had he been gay himself.
It was the victim he was looking for. He was looking for somebody to kill, and gay men are vulnerable in that sense. But he could have easily killed prostitutes. It didn't really matter to him. It was the killing that was enjoyable. And as far as I understand, he never had sex with any of his victims. There's no evidence at all of sexual attraction to gay men. So it wasn't homosexual type behaviour. It was simply they were vulnerable.
Kejahatan Cullen Ireland mendapat liputan sensasional di berbagai media, baik surat kabar dan TV-TV nasional. Kini ia menjadi orang yang sangat dikenal, yang kemudian dijuluki sebagai pembantai gay. Hal menarik yang turut diberitakan media adalah pengakuan Cullen yang mengatakan bahwa aktor tampan Tom Cruise sempat menjadi targetnya ketika ia melihat Tom Cruise sedang duduk di depan meja bar di sebuah bar gay di London. Tetapi kemudian ia tidak mendapatkan kesempatan untuk memikatnya. Namun sebagian besar meyakini bahwa itu adalah cerita bohong Cullen, karena pada saat itu Tom Cruise telah resmi memiliki pasangan wanita dengan aktris cantik, yakni Nicole Kidman. Cullen Ireland meninggal pada 21 Februari 2012 di penjara Wakefield pada usia 57 tahun. Dikabarkan bahwa penyebab kematiannya karena fibrosis paru dan patah pikul yang dideritanya.
Lots of people would say that he was a nice Cullen Ireland who...
If you think about serial killers, one of the things they have in their sense is that they are helpful and kind.
I often wonder whether Colin Ireland was born to kill.
He wanted to achieve a goal that many serial killers want to achieve, which is that they want status.
Colin was very manipulative, appeared to be genuine, and as a result was able to convince people to trust him.
But when you have somebody who wasn't insane, that's much more worrying, because we could all do that.
My impression of Colin Ireland was absolutely focused on his mission. It was a perverse mission. He wanted to have his place in history as a serial killer. That is sadly what he achieved. 5 people lie dead at his hand.
Untuk sobat semua, salam sehat, sukses dan bahagia selalu bersama keluarga sobat di rumah. Dan berikut sejumlah referensi dalam tayangan dokumenter kisah nyata K Channel kali ini. Bagaimana menurut Sobat K semua? Silahkan berbagi pendapatnya yang tentunya dengan sikap bijak dalam menerima berita dari berbagai media baik dari luar negeri maupun dalam negeri ke kolom komentar. Dan jangan lewatkan berita lainnya yang berbeda selanjutnya di K Channel.